Hello bow hunters, this is Ron once again with Stay Sharp. Today we're looking at the Muzzy Trocar Broadhead Sharpening. I picked these up online. Today we're going to look at, as we do in all of our videos, the out-of-the-box sharpness as well as what it would take to sharpen them. Now I am going to get on my soapbox here for a minute. And I'm going to do a little complaining in that I bought a pack of heads, and certainly if I shoot them into a target or in an animal, they're going to get dull. There is no way to get that little screw out. They did not ship the screw or the wrench to take those screws out for an additional 2 cents. Trust me, I know. For an additional 2 cents, they could have included a little Allen wrench. It's micro. It's 1/32 inch. I had to go and buy a $8 set just to get this tiny little micro tool to take them apart. So if you're going to ship somebody a broadhead that requires a incredibly micro screw to take the blades out and change them and replace them, include the darn wrench. Alright, so I'm off my soapbox now. We will look at these like we do with every other blade. We'll look at them under the microscope, we'll put them in a sharpness tester, and then we'll talk about sharpening them after that. So stay tuned. That edge looked okay on one side, it had a burr on the other. I looked at all three blades, they all had about the same degree of sharpness and looked the same under the microscope. So let's see how the out-of-the-box sharpness is for this head. .355, so that's not terrible. I think that's just outside my window of acceptable hunt ready. The edge looked pretty good, except they just did not get rid of that burr from the back side. So we're going to come up with a sharpening strategy, because I think these blades are thick enough and durable enough that you'll want to resharpen them once you've passed through an animal. That doesn't mean you have to dispose of them. It just means they're dull, so let's figure out a way to sharpen them. I'll be back. The best solution for sharpening this Trocar blade is our replaceable blade guide. This is the amount of exposure. The key is to keep the edge of the blade parallel to the roller. But the absolute test is the Sharpie marker test. So color up the blade with a dark colored marker so you can see your progress. And because these blades are new, they haven't been used, I'm going to start with 800 grit, then 12, then 25, and then we'll go on to buffing compound. But let's see how we have for alignment here. Light pressure. Don't push down hard. The weight of your hand is enough. You don't need to push down hard. You just wreck your diamond plates. Alright. Now let's flip it over. Make sure everything's cool on the other side. and the marker is gone evenly across, so I'm going to go until I get a burr at 800, and then we'll come back and talk. Alright, so I can tell already in the first grit that this is a standard commercial stainless steel, a little on the soft side, so it didn't take long to get a burr. I probably went 2 minutes total. Let's check to see if we've got a burr. And we do. The paper catches on it, hangs up, bends, flexes. You hear that clicking? That's the paper catching on the burr. So now that we've got a burr on one side with 800 grit, the task is to then flip it over, get rid of that burr, create a second burr that would be aimed up this way at 800 grit. When I have 2 burrs at 800 grit, we will clean the guide off so we don't transfer any of the 800 grit to our 1200 grit plate and contaminate it. And I will work on the second grit, and then we'll come back and talk. After the 800 grit, I then switched to the 1200 grit plate. This was working on my first burr. See how the paper flexes? That means it's stopped by the burr. Now that I've got my first burr at 1200 grit, I can flip the guide over, get a second burr, and after that I will transfer to the 2500 grit plate next. This is my first side at 2500 grit, and now it's time to check for a burr. So we've got a burr on one side at 2500 grit. The goal is to then flip it over, break off the burr that we worked so hard to get, and create a second burr. When I have created my second burr at 2500 grit, before I move on to buffing, I'll do a bunch of strokes on this side, flip it back over on this side, flip it back over, and just do a bunch of alternating strokes to make sure you've broken off all of the burr before moving on to buffing compound. So now that I've got burr number 1, it's time to work on the second burr. So I will be right back. With all of the grits done in diamond or wet dry sandpaper, you could use both for these blades. The last step is the strop, and you don't need to buy a leather strop. You can use the inside of the box from mashed potatoes, instant rice, cereal. All it is a vehicle or a carrier for the buffing compound that you will rub on, which has a suspended abrasive in the wax. The wax is only there to carry the abrasive. Then you will use a pulling only stroke, light pressure, lift, pull back, lift, so you don't push forward. That's the quickest way to cut off the buffing compound or cut into the cardboard. And you can't overdo this step. You can do it as much as you like, and try to keep your stroke count about even. Once you've done it on one side a number of times, try to match that on the other side. You are creating a burr that you really cannot detect at all with any paper or fingerprint. So just keep going through this alternating stroke method, and you will see in very short order that you are producing a very impressive mirrored finish on the blade, much like a scalpel. So I will continue to buff for a bit, and then we can look at it under the microscope and in the sharpness tester. That edge looked very good under the microscope, burr free, and when you're burr free you can have a pretty good edge. But that will bear out in the testing, so let's see how we do. .102. That's very sharp. That is sharper than razor blades that I've tested. I've tested box cutter type blades, shaving razor type blades, and here's the score you get with one of those. Now, a common question that I get is how much weight is taken off during a sharpening session. So let's look at that next. Here's our grain scale. We'll try to shield some of the glare here. There we go. I'll come down here a little closer. Get away from their glare. Here we go. All right. So here is one or both of the blades that I did nothing to. 10 grains. Here's the other one. 10 grains. Now we will take this one out of the sharpener. Again, this is our replaceable blade guide. And 10 grains. So I've done a lot of weight studies on sharpening. Even after you hit a rock and have to remove a nick, you really aren't removing that much material, but you are making the blades incredibly sharp. All you have to do is put them back together with this incredibly small Allen wrench, which is 1/32 of an inch. Tiny, tiny stuff. So there you have it. That is the Muzzy Trocar sharpening and sharpness evaluation. Thanks for watching.